All right. Thank you, Stephanie, so much for having me on to talk tonight, and thank you all for being here. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Angel, and I'm currently living in Tallahassee, Florida, as I pursue my doctorate in violin at Florida State University. Since I moved here to start my master's about 5 years ago, I really jumped into teaching and loved it. So I'm really excited about a project I've been working on, and I'll be sharing a bit of that with you tonight. The project is a content analysis of beginner violin books. I've been looking through a whole range of books, old and new, to compare their content and approach to teaching concepts. When I started teaching, I witnessed books working well for some students, but not others. And so this is what really inspired me to look at a variety of different books. I'm going to share my screen real quick. All right. So my goals with this project are to broaden my knowledge of resources available to improve my individualized and flexible approach to teaching, while also looking for any material that may be lacking representation. I then also want to turn my findings into a resource for other violin teachers or students and parents so that others can easily familiarize themselves with these books as well. And I hope to organize the information about book contents into clear and user-friendly content so that it's valuable to others. I want to be an expert librarian when choosing materials for my students, and I want to streamline the process for other teachers to do so as well. So this is essentially like a library for the violin teacher. I'm passionate about teaching with a student-centered approach to be flexible and aware of the differences between my students and how I can connect and teach each of them in the individual way that they need. And finding my passion for teaching with that approach is what really sparked my interest in wanting to explore a lot of different books. I was so curious just what all is out there. So I'm hoping that this project can also inspire other teachers to keep an open mind when making adjustments to their standard teaching approach when different types of students come through their door. I strongly believe that we can empower our students to reach their full potential, not only as students and musicians, but human beings if we create a personalized, supportive, and nurturing learning environment. So in this talk, we'll discuss the pedagogical differences between method and supplemental books, and I'll give examples of pedagogical priorities which are reflected in book sequencing. I'll talk about how and why to consider student variables when choosing books, and how having a diverse library of learning materials helps the private teacher create an inclusive studio and achieve impactful results. I want to begin by underscoring the great importance I see in having flexibility and open-mindedness in our teaching practices. While we may favor certain method books or supplemental resources based on our teaching philosophies and experience, it's crucial to remain receptive to new ideas and approaches as well. By actively listening to our students, observing their progress, and adapting our methods accordingly, we can cultivate a more inclusive and effective learning environment. So tonight we'll explore how embracing diversity in teaching materials can enrich our instructional strategies and ultimately enhance our students' learning experiences. Another important thing to acknowledge is that there are many ways to teach the violin, and my analysis of beginner books is grounded in this idea. There are many valid methods and perspectives in violin pedagogy. This talk reflects my own perspective, shaped by my experience and opinions, but it's crucial to recognize that there is no one-size-fits-all approach to teaching, and what works for one student may not work for another. I believe that teaching is a dynamic process that evolves to meet the unique needs of each learner. So my book project does not attempt to define the most effective methods of teaching. Instead, I invite you to engage with my insights, challenge them, and explore how they may align or diverge from your own beliefs and practices. The diversity of opinions and approaches within our teaching community is what enriches our collective understanding and fosters innovation in violin pedagogy. I'm a violinist, teacher, musician, performer, and lifelong student of the violin. I'm always searching for better ways to approach playing the instrument and how to teach it to others. I also have a patient and nurturing spirit that makes working with kids a joyful pursuit. These parts of who I am have led me to teaching music in one-on-one environments where I've discovered my love for teaching beginners. I teach one-on-one lessons with students ranging from the age of 3 to adult. I teach a group of preschoolers aged 3 to 5 at a local performing arts preschool, and I get to work with each of them individually. I also teach one-on-one lessons after school with students of all ages, but mostly between the ages of 6 to 12. I see teaching one-on-one lessons as a very special thing. Students come from classroom environments where teachers have to juggle the needs of some 30 students at a time. But when they come to their violin lesson, their teacher can be completely focused on them. And this allows for a more personalized learning experience, can be tailored to each student's unique needs, interests, and pace of learning. It also enables flexibility in our teaching approaches and fosters creativity in adapting to the student's progress and challenges. The quality of interaction in one-on-one lessons enhances understanding and skill development in violin playing. This provides a dynamic environment where learning is consistently evolving. The reality is that every student, teacher, and parent is different, and the combinations of the three cause so many different types of functioning relationships. So speaking of differences between my students, here's a look at the many variables that can be at play. There is age, cognitive development, attitude, personal interests, pace of learning, practice habits, parent involvement or lack thereof, and access to technology. These are a lot of important variables that make each student's learning situation different. And an important variable that impacts the success and enjoyment of music lessons is what the goals are altogether. When teachers, students, or parents aren't on the same page, it can lead to frustration, dissatisfaction, and a lack of engagement with the learning process. So for this reason, connection has always been a high priority in my teaching. Connecting with my students, showing them that I care and that I want to understand them, lays a foundation for more meaningful engagement in learning the violin. As music educators, we are regularly encountering a plethora of options when it comes to selecting teaching materials for our students. There are specialized supplements to traditional method books. There are many staples in our repertoire that we've relied on for years, and the choices can be overwhelming. Yet behind each book lies a unique pedagogical approach, reflecting different priorities and philosophies in introducing violin fundamentals. My analysis of beginner violin books has resulted in 2 categories. They are supplemental books and method books, and understanding the difference between them makes the large collection much more easy to explore. So method books are books which cover a range of topics with the goal of introducing the instrument to the student in a comprehensive manner. Here's a look at the many method books available to violin teachers and students today. All of these books are the current collection of my content analysis of the method books. There are 30 total right now, and their publication dates range from 1907 to 2003. If you're wondering why there's so many, I don't think it's that we haven't cracked the code on how to teach the violin. There just are many different ways. Supplemental books are designed to be added to a student's learning routine for deeper understanding, integration, and practice of specific skills. These books are intended to be paired with other books, whether that be other supplements or methods, to structure a comprehensive and individualized learning sequence for students. There are several different types of supplemental books that I've come across, and their topics range from scales, literacy development, technical studies, and specific targeted skills like rhythms and bowings. So before diving into what all of the books are, it's helpful to also think about why we use books in the first place. Books serve as a crucial aid for review and practice at home, where students can revisit concepts and techniques taught during their lesson. Given the limited amount of time that we have in lessons with our students, books offer a way for students to consolidate their learning independently, ensuring that important details aren't overlooked. Books also offer a tangible representation of progress and the student's excitement for learning. For progress, books offer a tangible map of learning, and finishing a book offers a moment of celebration for completing, which is really important because when we're learning an instrument, there's always something new that we can learn or do better on the next book or the next piece. So it's really important to have built-in celebrations along the way. I've found in my teaching that books also offer a fresh excitement for learning. Many times I've experienced students of mine losing their interest or motivation, and if we simply start a book or add another book to the mix, it sparks their excitement for learning again. Books also have considerable benefits for the teacher. Books provide guidance and structure, offering predetermined sequences of concepts and exercises that help streamline the teaching process. However, it's important to recognize that the effectiveness of book sequences may vary depending on the individual teacher's pedagogical preferences and priorities. Like many others, when I started teaching violin, I had a lot of beginners. On our first recital, I realized that more than half of my students were playing Twinkle. I asked myself, what's so special about Twinkle? Why isn't everyone playing Row, Row, Row Your Boat, or I'm a Little Teapot, or any number of other common nursery tunes? I got the sense also from my students that their performances didn't feel that special because they were just playing the same thing as everyone else. Looking back at when I started teaching, I didn't necessarily know the right way to begin, so I referenced resources online that gave advice and instruction on how to approach those first lessons. And the common thread that I found was that students start in a pre-Twinkle stage, and the goal of their beginning lessons is to get them to the Twinkle stage. So now I ask myself why this is, and it could be because the incredibly established method of Suzuki starts with Twinkle. Or it could be that Twinkle really is just a really great, reliable nursery tune that students know. After all, many of us learn our alphabet with Twinkle. I don't necessarily have the answer to this, but it's been worth reflecting on, and I'd love to hear if any of you have thoughts on it as well. So while I was teaching my students Twinkle, I also found myself conflicted in how I was teaching the left hand, because when I'd introduce students to placing the fingers for the first time, I was teaching them in the ascending motion, placing the index finger first, then the middle finger, then the ring finger. But then I would have them playing Twinkle, where they'd have to play in the descending motion. As you can see here, with all of the red boxes, is where students are required to play that descending finger pattern. And because of this difference in how I was introducing the fingers and what my students were having to play for Twinkle, I started to supplement teaching scales alongside Twinkle so that students were getting practice going up and down with their finger placement. And today I'm also exploring other common tunes like Twinkle that have ascending finger patterns that could possibly fill Twinkle's place in the early violin learning stages. And here are just some examples that I've come across. So we have the tune Brother John. This starts with ascending finger placement, which is great. And on the second line, students would also play the descending. So it gives them experience with both of those. You Are My Sunshine also starts with ascending finger patterns, but because of the importance of counting note values in this melody, it makes it much different than Twinkle. Oh Susanna is another example, but it also includes a great amount of finger skips from open string to second finger, which adds in another technique that Twinkle wasn't. Pop Goes the Weasel might be the best contender with all of the ascending finger placements, but again, there are more techniques at play with the half note, quarter note rhythms and the requirements of bow distribution, etc. So another thing that I have found is slightly modifying pitches to maintain a simple finger pattern. So this example is Yankee Doodle from the book Knowing the Notes for Violin. In red is where the ascending finger patterns are used, which is used the most. And where there is a descending in purple, students are first doing the ascending, so that works out nicely. And then in green is where the tune was slightly modified to maintain a simple finger pattern. And so here is a look at all of those methods, and it turns out that the majority of them introduce finger placement with the ascending pattern. So 24 out of 30 of them did this, and 6 of 30 introduced with either the descending finger pattern or the first song is requiring the descending finger pattern. Teaching the finger placement in the ascending motion is an example of a pedagogical preference, one that I have. And it turns out that the majority of method books, like I just showed you, introduce in the ascending motion. So another example of a pedagogical preference or priority is the use of finger numbers instead of note names. Some teachers will take this approach to simplifying the left-hand learning, and referring to notes with the fingers that will play them connects the cognitive with the physical. Finger numbers also limit the number of options to choose from when students are translating staff notation to what they physically play on the violin. And this is not the case with letter names, because letter names don't signify a consistent location on the fingerboard. For example, if there is a 1 written in the student's music, they will always use the index finger across all strings. Finger numbers can also simplify the student's translation of staff notation to playing notes on the violin. And there's great value in teaching sequences that tackle one step at a time, and narrowing the number of variables in note reading makes it more approachable. Once students have a strong understanding of where the open strings are on the staff, this really narrows down the options. They then ask themselves a question of if the note is on a line or a space, which there are 2 possible options, line or space. And then after that, if they are on a space, again, there's only 2 options. It's either an open string or played with a second finger. And for line, either first finger or third finger. The benefits of simplifying the left hand are great in some contexts, but it also delays the student's understanding of pitches and their relationship with others. And in addition, if students aren't taught note names, letters, well before shifting is introduced, then their entire process of reading the staff notation will be uprooted, which is incredibly discouraging. So that's something that we have to consider if we are using this approach. So here's 2 examples from books where finger numbers are being used. We have Learning the Violin, which starts out with the large font with just the finger numbers, which is great for our youngest learners. And you also have an example here where descending finger motion is being used for on the top and then ascending on the bottom. And then the other example also shows how finger numbers can be used alongside staff notation. This is a great book that I've discovered, Knowing the Notes for Violin by Kasha Harvey. This book is designed to teach students pitch names after they've spent a good amount of time in finger numbers alone. So for all of the exercises in the book, notes are labeled with numbers until a specific note is addressed, and then it's labeled with the note name, the letter, for the remaining pages. So this example here is the note B, the first finger on the A string. So here are the examples of books which introduced notes with letter names only or with finger numbers only. And there are also many books which introduced them together, both numbers and letters at the same time. There are also a few books which use numbers and letters very minimally. Learning the violin requires many skills for the teacher to juggle without overwhelming students, losing their interest or discouraging them. So here is a look at all of those things that the beginner violinist is working on. And to get started playing the violin, there are skills to develop on both sides of the body, and then students also have to work on coordinating those skills. Trying to teach too many concepts at the same time can result in cognitive overload for students. But focusing on one skill at a time helps students experience success more regularly, making learning more rewarding for everyone involved. This is a reason that supplemental books can be incredibly valuable. In supplemental books, students can be working on multiple skills at a period of time, but focus on individual skills throughout the process. And having books that target specific skills empowers students and teachers to set priorities and structure training so that more skills are addressed without burnout. So for example, a student could have 2 different books where in one book they are focusing on the left hand and don't worry too much about the right hand at this time, and then you switch gears and do the opposite so that students can really focus their attention on one thing at a time. So pedagogical priorities impact the sequence and timeline that we teach skills and concepts. And another common preference that teachers have is between different methods of how information is fed to students. On the one hand, teachers can model skills for students with demonstration and teach skills how to listen and repeat material. On the other hand, teachers can first teach students the skills and tools they need to work through material more independently. This increases cognitive load, but empowers students with the ability to understand concepts more fully. So teaching through modeling and listening skills allows students to focus on the physical aspects of playing that are quite awkward at the beginning. So that is a benefit with that approach. It's also valuable for students to get an early start on learning what to listen for when they're playing. The modeling and ear training approach also has limitations. Students become dependent on their teachers and on recordings to learn any new material. And with note reading being delayed, sight reading can become a challenge for students as they enter into environments like orchestra. In addition, this approach results in playing from memory. And though not always, there's the risk of students learning to trust their muscle memory over understanding the musical concepts they're playing, which can lead to challenges down the line. In contrast, if teachers take an early literacy approach, students are taught the skills and tools needed to learn independently, and this empowers them to take charge of their learning. When students can read music, they don't need their teachers or recordings to spoon feed them every note. And developing strong sight reading skills helps students learn music faster and understand musical concepts more fluently. This prepares them for success in many environments, including orchestra. In addition, the literacy training streamlines the cognitive coordination between the visual stimuli and the physical movements, and this makes sheet music an asset in performance. But it's important to recognize also the limitations to this approach. The visual demands of learning to read music take students' attention away from the physical techniques that they're working on, and these visual demands can cause cognitive overload for students who are maybe too young to be doing all of these things at once, or who are getting discouraged and having resistance to learning for this reason. So we're now going to go over a couple examples, and here are some method books that align with these pedagogical priorities I just described. We have Violin and Suzuki, which prioritize the ear training method. And the other two methods, A Tune a Day and Maya Bang, systematically teach students concepts step by step so that literacy can progress alongside physical playing. So we're going to take a closer look at each method. The Suzuki Violin School is a widely used and trusted method internationally. Suzuki is often described as the mother tongue method, as it's based on the idea that children can learn music the same way that they learn their primary language, by ear and immersion. The method stresses the importance of parent involvement and access to recordings so that students can listen to the music daily to develop musical sensitivity. This book is repertoire focused, meaning that the book outlines a sequence of repertoire, but the teacher is responsible for filling in any gaps along the way. Techniques used in the repertoire are not prepared by the book itself. Other characteristic elements of the learning sequence in Suzuki is that rhythm variations are introduced very early on, and finger placement is introduced in the descending motion with twinkle, as we've talked about. So this chart shows the Suzuki repertoire sequence and what new skills are introduced for each piece that a student learns. The sequence starts with twinkle, which involves many things, including playing on the A and E strings, using the bow, making string crossings, placing and lifting the fingers in the 2-3 finger pattern and in the descending motion, and there are also several rhythm variations. So these are a lot of variables for the beginner student to be multitasking at once, and as they go on to each new song in the book, there is always at least one new thing that they are tackling. So here is the sequence continued, as you can see. When we get down to the minuets, there are quite a few unprepared techniques that students have to tackle. So we're going to take a closer look at those. Minuet 1 requires hooked bowings, the alternating of finger patterns for the first time, and it's the first occurrence of accidentals, and the first piece in 3/4 time without half notes. Minuet 2 has even more unprepared techniques. Students will play multi-string jumps, slurs, bow articulation changes, triplets, string crossings in slurs, and a new finger pattern all in one piece. And these aren't just the skills that they're employing all at once, these are the brand new skills that are required of them. So we are going to listen to each of these with the score, and I have noted all of these brand new techniques that are put together at once. So follow along and just think to yourself, if you are this student going through their first book in Suzuki, how overwhelming it would be with all of these things introduced at once in the repertoire alone. Let's see, let me get this loaded really quick. Were you guys able to hear that? Okay, great. Let me get back to here. All right, so all of these unprepared techniques can be found in different supplemental books. So I'm going to show a few examples, but there are many. So this example is from Fiddle Magic by Sally O'Reilly, and there are multiple instances in the book where students get to work on these hooked bowings by themselves. So these exercises are either 1 or 2 lines long, and it allows for students to work on this new technique consolidated into one short exercise. Here's another example from this book where we have accidentals and alternating the finger patterns. There are many examples like this, but exercises in 3/4 time with dotted half notes, and also the working on bow retakes. So another thing to note about Minuet 2 is how long it is. It is considerably longer than anything else that students have learned in the book. And all of these new skills are happening all over, combined, and in addition to the review of new skills that were just introduced in Minuet 1 as well. So we will listen to Minuet 2 now. All right. So all of these skills, again, can be found in these supplemental books. There are a lot of examples from the technical studies books Fiddle Magic by Sally Riley is a great book for this. So here are two examples in the book where students can work on those multi-string jumps that they do in this piece. Here's another great book for working on string crossings in slurs and also those multi-string jumps. So this is Open String Bow Workouts by another book by Kasha Harvey. And the entire book is open strings, but addresses a bunch of different bowing techniques, double stops, and things like that. Here are a couple examples of exercises in triplets and slurs in groups of 3. There are many examples just like this. And another example of exercises with string changes in slurs. So these are from Super Studies for Violin by Mary Cohen. So let's say that the Suzuki method does align with your pedagogical priorities and preferences. It's important to also consider all the student variables that could impact a student's success with the method. So here's an example. You get a sweet 4-year-old student who is overjoyed by the thought of playing the violin and has begged her parents to take lessons. She can't wait to make music. You do your best to set up her posture and bow hold, but she's just so antsy to start playing. You try to teach her sliding on the magic X to set up the left hand shape and placement, but her little hand just latches onto the neck of the violin with a tight squeeze. You question if her little fingers are even long enough for proper positioning and placement. Can this student start learning the violin yet? If the only option was Suzuki and diving right into all of these techniques, it might not go very well. But there are other methods that make learning not only possible, but enjoyable for this student and teacher. Violin is an example of a method that would be a great option for this situation. It would also be a great option for a student who may be a little bit older, but experiencing stress and losing interest from trying to integrate too many things at once. These students often start to say that violin isn't fun, or it's too hard, or they're suddenly too tired to try anything. We've all heard these things. Violin offers students an extension of those early learning stages with fun and engaging music that students really love to play. And I can say from personal experience that students really do love the music. So Violin is a very new method. It was created by Crystal Boyack in 2022 and focuses on the setup and development of the right hand. So posture, bowing, and rhythms are emphasized the most. Students get the opportunity to engage with a variety of music while regularly achieving success and progressing throughout the book. The techniques are paced and prepared through a sequence of songs that are learned by ear and from teacher modeling. The book also comes with recordings that can be accessed online that I use constantly. Crystal Boyack's main point with writing this method is to share what she thinks is the best way to teach Twinkle, and that is not to teach Twinkle at all. So I will explain what she means by that as we go. Violin is comprised of music gathered from all around the world, and here's a look at that sequence. Most of the songs in the book have lyrics to encourage singing along, to feel rhythms, and to engage closer with the music. Songs come from various cultures and places, and as you can see here, the first 10 songs in the book use the E string only, and students cycle through learning these different rhythm variations, first with the rhythm and then a nice measure of rest for the teacher to adjust anything, and then they play other songs that use those same rhythms with less rests. Once the A string is introduced, there are several songs that alternate between the E and A strings, so students get experience with string crossings. And then at the song John the Rabbit, the left hand is introduced for the first time with a harmonic on the A string. And then the fingers are introduced in the descending motion, starting with the third finger, and then adding 2, and then doing all 3, 2, 1. The last 3 songs in the book use the notes of Twinkle. There are 4 notes per Violin song. And for these 3 songs, there's an extra challenge for students. They are asked to play through the tune and cycle through all 5 rhythm patterns. So they get experience and build their stamina up a little bit with these 3 songs. And you can see here, this is one of them, the first one. So they will play first with the rhythm. We call it Everybody Up Now with the first song in the book, but it is also commonly Mississippi Hot Dog, etc. And then they will play each of these other rhythm variations to build the stamina there. When students finish the book, they are then asked to play the last 3 songs back to back in this order. And I usually call this the Wee Violin graduation song, because after this, they are graduating from the book and moving on to wherever we go next. And in this instance, students get to choose their own rhythm. They can choose any that they've learned in the book to play through this last song. One of my students is going to demonstrate this so you can hear it. Listen for the notes of twinkle, see if you can hear it within the Wee Violin songs. So let's see, let me get this queued up. One second, I don't think I shared properly. Are you guys able to see the video right now? No, okay. Here we go. All right, is it there now? Awesome. All right, so that is the Wee Violin graduation song. I've had a lot of success with this method. Students really don't get very stressed, and their posture and setup, bow arm gets set up just beautifully. If you want to teach the Suzuki method, this book perfectly prepares you for that, because it gets the student right up to playing Twinkle, and then they could transition to the Suzuki method. All right, I'm going to share my slides again. One moment. All right. So now we're going to switch gears to the method books that prioritize the cognitive understanding of musical concepts and the development of musical literacy. So first we have Maya Bang. Maya Bang was a student of Leopold Auer and compiled his books of teaching into a series of 7 method books. The method prioritizes literacy development by adding one element at a time and integrating concepts with plenty of practice. Some characteristics of the learning sequence are that finger placement is introduced in the ascending finger pattern motion. Various finger patterns are learned, and all strings are worked on equally. The systematic style of the sequence makes it pair well with the metronome, and all student repertoire in the book is written as duets. Leopold Auer's fundamental principle of this method is to combine purely technical with musical needs at all times by providing a liberal amount of technical material and relieving it with melodious little pieces designed to interest the pupil and accustom their ear to pleasing and gratifying musical impressions from the very start. So the book prioritizes the left hand development, which is explained in this quote by Maya Bang. With exercises offering difficulties for both fingers and bow, the task of mastering the technical details should be divided, owing to the fact that it is a difficult problem for young pupils to concentrate simultaneously upon such different work as the right and left hands are called upon to execute. The entire attention of the pupil should be concentrated at first upon the fingers of the left hand, using a separate bow for each note, and only adding marked bowings when there is a comparative certainty about intonation and finger action. So this is the same idea as was in the Violin book, except they are just switching it, where this book is focusing on the fingers, where the other book started by focusing on the bow. Maya Bang book contents fall into these categories: the introduction of notes and placement on the fingerboard, technical exercises, scales, etudes, and student repertoire. The book is divided into 119 entries, and the first 30 of them are a slow introduction to the open strings and adding fingers. All strings are worked on evenly, as I'll show an example of what the book looks like in just a moment. And after this opening section where the notes are first introduced, then the rest of the book cycles through the remaining categories. So there will be a technical exercise and then a student piece, and scales and etudes are mixed in. The 10 etudes throughout the book expose students to different time signatures, new note values, and slur patterns. Here's a look at the different types of technical exercises used throughout the book. Finger mechanics, bowing, rhythms, and string crossings are focused on. There's also some variety in the student repertoire. There are 10 etudes, 9 duets by classical composers, and 22 duets by the author Maya Bang, many of which are traditional and folk tunes arranged. These give students opportunities for things to play at recitals as they're working through this systematic book, which is really great, and it also gives them an opportunity to play along with their teacher. So here's an example of how the notes are introduced. This is an example of the A string being introduced. So as you can see, if students aren't counting note values here, it's pretty repetitive. So the note values are emphasized, but there's lots of practice in note reading. And then here's an example of where the fingers are being introduced. And on the A and E string, as you can see, the half step between 1 and 2 finger pattern is used, and then different finger pattern is introduced for the D and G strings. So another method that is similar to Maya Bang is a tune-a-day. This method takes the same literacy approach, but remains much more simple technically. For starters, here are the similarities between the methods. There are multiple exercises to practice each new technical concept. Literacy is trained. Notes are introduced with both finger numbers and letter names. Both books start with the finger pattern with a half step between 2 and 3. Counting of note values is emphasized, that I just showed, and many of the student rep pieces are duets. There are also some significant differences between the methods. Maya Bang is organized into 119 numbered entries, but a tune-a-day instead is 32 lessons. Though both books emphasize note values, they introduce them in the opposite order. Maya Bang starts with quarter notes, where a tune-a-day starts with whole notes and has more rests. The scales learned in the book also kind of show the difference in complexity of fingerboard understanding and the finger patterns being learned. Because Maya Bang follows the circle of fifths and starts with C major and A minor, there are many more finger patterns that students are learning, where in a tune-a-day, it remains much more simple with the 3 scales that use the finger pattern with half step between 2 and 3, D major, A major, and G major 1 octave. All pieces in Maya Bang are duets, where in a tune-a-day there are both duets and solos. The pedagogical priorities behind a tune-a-day method can be understood from this quote in the author's foreword to teachers. Paul Herforth says, "Many teachers do the thinking for their pupils instead of helping them to think for themselves. Insisting upon the mastery of each point will not dull their interest. What greater joy, whether it be a child or adult, than to accomplish, achieve, and gain more power." The contents of a tune-a-day can be divided into 2 categories: technical exercises and student repertoire. All the technical exercises in the book, 85% involve the introducing of new notes and note values. So for students who are moving through the book at a slower pace for any number of reasons, this can make the book a challenge in maintaining interest. Here's a look at how the notes are first introduced in this book. So on the first page, we have lesson 1, where the A string is introduced, so you can kind of compare how this looks with Maya Bang. And then jumping ahead to lesson 8, this is where the second finger is being introduced. So we have a couple exercises and then some solos and so on. Another big difference between the books is that in Maya Bang, all 4 strings are worked on equally from the very start, where in a tune-a-day, for the first 18 lessons, students will play all of the strings at the very start on open strings, but then when fingers are being introduced, the A and D strings are emphasized the most, where there's exercises for introducing just the first finger on both strings, and so on, where the E string and G string are saved until lesson 19 and 20, where students will then play all the fingers on these strings because they've had experience with that. So looking back at this quote from the author, many teachers do the thinking for their pupils instead of helping them to think for themselves. As teachers, I think it's important that we have an awareness for what our students need from us, and to always check in with this awareness. The student who isn't ready to figure out every step on their own will be ready one day, and the key for us to set our students up for success is to pivot at the right time. So students will generally all learn the same things, just at different times and in different ways. Unfortunately, there isn't enough time to explore all of the books today, but I'm going to give a quick look at the different categories and what their contents offer. So this is kind of a lot on one page, but this shows you the different finger patterns that are covered in the method books. So of the 30 method books, 12 of them remain simple with that finger pattern with half step between 2 and 3, and these are those. 8 of the books also introduce the low 2 finger pattern. There are also several that go much more in depth with adding the lowered first finger and the raised third finger, so you can see those here. And if you add this up, it does not equal 30 because there is one book that doesn't involve finger placement at all. This is a super cute book that stays on open strings the whole time, and it's like storybook based. Definitely recommend that for your youngest students. So now we'll just quickly walk through the supplemental books and their categories. So this is the group of scale books that I've looked at so far. Each of these remains in first position, which was kind of my criteria that I gave for this collection. But there's also many differences between them. So 2 of them do just major scales, where 4 of them have major and minor scales. There's also differences in the complexity. So the Violin Scale Book for Beginners by Harry Hunt remains very simple in the fact that it is all written out in quarter notes. There are 2 different visual aids to help the student understand how they are playing the scale, and there are some bowing variations with slurs. In comparison, the A Tune-a-Day scale book goes much more in depth with different note values, different techniques, including arpeggios, thirds, broken chords, and even going into double stops. A couple of the books also pair scales with student repertoire. So here's an example from this book. The book is laid out with the scale on one page and then a student piece that applies the scale. And that's the format for the whole book. This has a dinosaur theme, which is really cute. So each scale has a different dinosaur name. So students can apply that name to the scale. We have the scale and then the arpeggio. And then as you can see here, all of the pieces really well apply the key. So this one starts with the A major arpeggio, for example. This is another example of a book that has the scale on one page and then some exercises on the next. This is the collection of literacy books, and many of them have extra large font, which makes them really great for young students who are learning to read on the staff for the first time. It can be really challenging seeing those small little notes and the differences on lines and space. So it's really great to find a book with extra large font. These are the technical studies books. We saw examples from these earlier on. And then there's also books that target specific skills like double stops, rhythms, tempo, and bowings. So if you'd like to follow along with this content analysis of beginner books, I'm posting my findings on Instagram to this account, Violin Book Nook. You can scan this QR code if you'd like to follow me. And in conclusion, the journey of teaching and learning the violin is deeply personal and ever evolving. By thoughtfully integrating beginner books into our teaching, we create a structured yet flexible pathway for our students to follow, and this fosters their growth and enthusiasm for music. These books not only serve as invaluable resources for reviewing and practice at home, but they also mark significant milestones and celebrating the students' progress and reigniting their passion for learning. As teachers, I believe our goal is to balance guidance with openness, adapting our methods to meet the unique needs of each student. By prioritizing connection and understanding, we can create learning environments that encourage students to embrace the joys and the challenges of learning the violin. So this project will, I hope, evolve for years to come into different resources and on different platforms. If you want to stay up to date on all things Violin Book Nook related, you can scan this QR code to be taken to a form to sign up for my mailing list, and I will let you know of any changes as we go. On this form, you can also indicate if you'd like to be emailed a free PDF of any of the visuals I used on this presentation, so you can look back at the groups of methods and such. I also welcome any of your feedback or questions you have on this form. And just one more thing, I'd love to share with you my Etsy shop. I make these t-shirt designs and learning aids for fun on the side. On the shop, you can order cute t-shirts and download digital posters. The t-shirts are perfect for music teachers and students alike. T-shirts come in both adult and student sizes, child sizes. And for tuning in tonight, you can enjoy 20% off your order by typing in the discount code ViolinBookNook at checkout. So here's a look at the different types of t-shirts on the shop. Different animals playing instruments always makes me smile, so there are many of those. When I'm teaching, I love to wear little things that make my students smile: earrings, shoes, t-shirts. So that's kind of what sparked my inspiration for putting these together. It just makes the learning environment more fun and lighthearted. Like I said, if you're interested in anything on here, you can get 20% off your order for tuning in. Just type in the offer code ViolinBookNook at checkout. So here are all three of those QR codes again, if you need any of them, and we'll leave them up for just a minute so you can scan them if you're interested. I want to thank you all so much for being here tonight, and I hope that this talk has been valuable to you. I'd love to hear from you if you have any comments or questions, feedback of any sort, or if you have any book suggestions that you know of that I don't have on here. And of course, thank you, Stephanie, so much for hosting me tonight.